Hey everybody, nice to see such a packed room. My name is Juan, and normally in another universe, I'll be giving a talk probably about data modeling, probably something analytics. But today I'm going to talk about a topic that is very close to my heart really, which is meetups. And even before we start, some things that I want to tell you is firstly, in this talk, I'm going to use the term meetup very loosely for some sort of event that has something to do with technology. It can be as informal as data drinks, but it could also be something more formal like a conference or something like this, really. To understand how I got involved in the whole meetup thing, I think there are some things that you need to understand about me. First things first, I was born and raised in Latin America. And what you should know is, for Latin people, organizing events and hospitality are massive. Ever since you're a kid, you get used to organizing big things and having people over, and just making big events is not a really big issue for us. And what I noticed back in, those years when I started university is very quickly I became very popular for my skill to organize parties. Back then I thought to myself, oh wow, organizing is not something very difficult to me. And people really learned to appreciate this. So that's more or less the first time that I realized there is something in there. Back in 2015 when I graduated, I was terribly broke. So any type of event where I could, learn a little bit better how to do my job and score a free pizza was an amazing thing for me. I think during this period, when I was a recent graduate, I might have attended meetups almost every week of the year. There was a time, though, where I attended this one meetup, and my first thought was, this meetup was terrible. I'm sure anybody could organize something better than this. And that's, of course, when it hit me, like the flash of a camera. You know what? I'm going to give it a try. I'm going to organize my first meetup. And so somewhere in 2018, I organized the first data visualization meetup back in Amsterdam. And to my surprise, it was not very scary. Things went very naturally. It wasn't a big amount of work. Very easily, I could fill up a room of 100 people. And I said 100 because the venue insisted that we couldn't fit any more people. And that's where I realized there is something about meetups that is really magical. Now, of course, we will find out 2 years later that there was something about virtual meetups that is definitely not magical at all. But I just want to mention that ever since life became a bit more normal, I joined a company, and funny story, I got to know them because of meetups. I think I attended maybe 7 meetups at Civia before I even considered applying. So when I first joined and life was becoming normal, to me it was a big priority, okay, let's get meetups started back again. So let me first tell you why exactly meetups? What's their charm? What's their magic? I think you can break it down into 3 big pillars. The first one is, it's probably the best marketing a company can do. Why? It's super cheap, sometimes free, sometimes a couple €1,000, which for a marketing campaign is very low. But at the same time, everybody that you're hitting with this initiative is people that are very passionate about something technology that live close to your office. That amount of relevance you cannot get with any other type of campaign. And for that price, and we're talking about something that takes 5 to 10 hours to organize. So I think if you work in a company and you're considering recruitment strategies, meetups can be a great thing. Second thing is, meetups are an amazing way for you and the people in your organization to learn leadership skills. And by that I mean everything from the very cliche teamwork to organizing things, And even public speaking, all of those things, meetups are a low stakes environment to practice them. And finally, there is networking. For me personally, the big charm of meetups is all of the people I get to meet. Sometimes there are people in the data world that I admire, and I think reaching out to them and asking them to speak at my meetups is the perfect excuse for me to have access to people that I admire a lot in the data world. And of course, there is the free t-shirts, and sometimes they invite you to speak at conferences, but the slide was not big enough. So now that we know why meetups are so awesome, let me tell you about the latest meetup that I've been organizing. For the last couple of years, 2.5 years, I've been working as an analytics engineer. And if you haven't heard that term yet, that's completely fine. The first mention of that thing was back in 2019. And by the time we started at Civia, it was super unknown in almost every market, really. So I'm very proud that I managed to go to meetup.com and claim the name Analytics Engineering Meetup. I'm fairly sure people all over the world and in San Francisco would love to have that name. But now I own it, so that's amazing news. And this graph, which I made, I still can make beautiful graphs sometimes, it's kind of the statistics of the first meetup that we had. Now, granted, this one was like virtual, it was the first one. By now, we can attract much bigger audiences. But already this, for such a little effort, I think those are great numbers. Okay, so now for the rest of the presentation, let me tell you some of the key points that you should know if you're planning to organize a meetup. Because remember, you can organize internal meetups, like with your own employees exchanging knowledge, or you can make them as a community effort, and who knows, maybe get some marketing, maybe get some recruitment efforts out of it. The first thing when you create a meetup is to think about the group that you're going to establish. Think about your identity. Some things that are important is, one, what is the topic? Are you going to go for something super niche, like the Apache Airflow meetup? You know that's not going to reach a lot of people, but everybody that goes there, it's as relevant as it goes. Or you can do the opposite approach, which is to go for something more generic, like the SQL meetups, the data engineering meetups, the data mesh meetup, whatever it is. And you know that's going to bring a big wave of people that sometimes might not be too relevant. So finding that balance of like relevance versus big crowd is interesting. You also have to think about identity. So what exactly do you want your meetup to be known for? In my particular case, I wanted, one, a meetup that it was not like super tight when it comes to organization. I want to organize a meetup in less than 5 hours. Two, I want to have a lot of diversity in terms of speakers. For us in particular, we really want to have one speaker that is, let's say, upcoming, local talent, you know what I mean? And have another speaker that is quite famous, somebody that has their own audience. But the truth is, these rules, this identity that you're making for your group is 100% up to you. It can be that you only serve pizza, for example, or that, I don't know, you only host that in the top of a building type of situation. And finally, like which platforms you're gonna use. The good news is doing marketing in Meetup is insanely easy. You just create a group, create an event. It's not very expensive. And trust me, without any need to do any paid advertisement, Meetup groups just get completely filled out. And sure, I organized them in Amsterdam, which is a tech hub, and they already have a big community, but people just have a way to find these meetups. So just organically, I cannot suggest a better platform than Meetup for this. And definitely not Facebook events. So you already have your group, your identities formed. You maybe have a team of hopefully not more than 3 people. If you're more than 3 people, then you're just having a lot of management meetings instead of like organizing stuff. But okay, that's up to you. Then, before your first meetup, there are 3 things you need to get sorted out. In my case, it's quite easy because my employer does most of these things. But really, you need a sponsor, somebody to pay for food and drinks, and maybe a venue, or to give swag or whatever it is that they want to do. For sponsors, it can be tricky at times because some companies might have some interest behind organizing it. They might ask you to play some speakers. They might ask you to cancel talks from a potential competitor, those types of things. But the truth is, most vendors, most companies that support open source, they're super happy to just donate something to your meetup. So it might seem very daunting, but if you reach out, it's surprisingly much easier than what you might expect. The other one is the venue. Most companies have a spare office after 6 p.m. that they can give to you completely for free. But you might want to consider a venue like this one, which is maybe a bit more neutral. It comes with its costs. And so for those reasons, you kind of really want to have a sponsor. In the best case scenario, sponsor and venue come together. Now, the one that I consider to be surprisingly difficult is finding speakers. I do have some tips for you later on finding speakers, but essentially, in its most common format, even though I see people doing something like data and drinks or very unstructured meetings, in most common formats, you need 2, 3, maybe 1, maybe 4 speakers to make the program of the day. And for those people, a lot of times you want to go for, ideally, people that are very well-known, that are very experienced. And so here's the thing. One is, there is a big group of people that will not collaborate if you don't pay them. There is a group of people that are technically outstanding, but they hate anything that has to do with socializing. So the pool of really great tech people that would be happy to speak, it's not as massive as you might think. The best advice that I give people is look at other meetups. People that presented in other meetups, chances are that they might say yes. Or just become really good at networking and try to convince somebody into presenting. For example, I made an anonymized version, and sorry for adding text into the slides. I know it's something that I've seen a lot today, but I personally hate. But essentially, when you're reaching out to a speaker, I have templates like this. By the way, you can get it later with the slides. Some tips that are worth mentioning is, if you're gonna reach out to somebody you don't know, be very careful because, well, you guys know it. Who doesn't ignore LinkedIn if it sounds like they're gonna sell you something, right? So it has to be very clear that one, you're not selling something, you're not trying to recruit that person. It really has to come from a place of, very similar to open source initiatives, from a place of, yeah, I really care about the community efforts. And that's something that a lot of speakers can really smell. If they feel like, yeah, I'm just promoting something for you, it's very different than if you're really genuine about like exchanging knowledge with people. Another tip, which is kind of embedded in this whole message, is it works out much better, not only speakers, but also sponsors and venues, when you give the impression that the meetup is going to happen no matter what, with or without you. If you hear hesitation in the message, like, oh, we're still looking for a speaker, we don't know, let me tell you which date once we have speakers confirmed, that tends to deter a lot of people. So if you kind of scroll into there, you're going to notice that I tend to emphasize a lot that the thing is happening. Like, our next meetup will take place, ma'am, even if you don't have a venue or anything, that's fine. But just those 2 tips I can give you, they make life much, much easier when it comes to convincing people. Once you have the 3 key elements of the meetup, you're ready to go. But then now you have to worry about marketing. So making sure that people actually attend, which to me personally, after finding speakers, is the second most difficult part. Meetups have interesting challenges. The first one is quite often you don't charge people, so they don't have a great incentive to not cancel last minute. And you also don't really track people that well. So it's hard to know if the people that join were signed up or not, or if this, or it's just kind of hard to know how many people are really gonna show up. But my advice is always, one, Meetup.com does an amazing job at bringing people organically. As a matter of fact, my colleagues are organizing a meetup tonight, and we didn't have to advertise anything. Meetup just filled the whole thing up in 2 weeks. And the last couple of days, an insane amount of people just sign up if there is still space. So most of the heavy lifting is done by you, for you by the platform. You can do paid ads, but I also have heard from some people that this can be counter-effective. A lot of times when people attend meetups, they don't want to feel that you're selling them something. So if it comes across as more as something from person to person initiative, like a community thing, tends to work better than if a company is promoting it. But who knows, maybe people love your brand so much that that's good enough to bring people. Now, word of mouth, telling people, telling your colleagues, telling people that used to work in your company. In our case, we're a consultancy, so telling my former clients, hey, we're organizing this and I think you will be interested in this talk. That works quite a lot. And that leads me to the last point, which sounds stupid, but it feels like I think a lot of people have forgotten the power of reaching out directly to people. Send people a message and make sure that they get the impression that, one, you wrote it directly to them, and two, that you would notice if they don't come. If you say, hey, we're doing this thing, and I remember the other day we talked about this topic and you're interested, maybe you will have something in common with the speaker. That resonates always much, much better than a message that looks the same for everybody. The other thing is, ask people to bring somebody. Like if you tell the speaker, let's say you have 2 speakers in your meetup, tell them, hey, bring 3 people. That's already like a bigger group. And then if you tell your co-organizers, hey, bring 3 people, even if it's, I don't know, your neighbor, your wife, whatever it is that you want to bring, only then you're almost ensuring yourself a group of 20 people, which to me is the critical difference between a room with like 5 creepy people that feels super awkward to a really full-fledged event where like, oh, this is interesting, I might meet somebody interesting. So even if it's cheating, make sure that you get that critical mass of around 20 people. Now, 7 days before the meetup, some of the things you want to do is more marketing. Know that the people that you manage to catch, the closer to the event, they become much more relevant than the people that sign up early. Simply because if I said that I'm attending a meetup 10 minutes ago, chances that I'm going to be there are massive. While people that maybe sign up 2 months in advance, they probably forget or they plan something else. So these people are probably the most important ones. Sometimes I come up with initiatives saying like, hey, we still have room for like some tickets, whatever it is, even if it's not necessarily the case. Because the people that reach out to me on the day itself, like, hey, I'm in the waiting list, but I really want to come, I know they're gonna come like 99% for sure. While the cancellation rates on meetup.com, according to my statistics, are somewhere between 30 to 50%. I think it's more closer to the 30. 50 was the time that there was a traffic strike, and then there was like a snowstorm, and worst date ever to organize a meetup. But yeah, count with 30% of the people not showing up. So maybe invite 30% more people than what you can host, if you're risky. Other thing which people forget a lot, and I think it's vital, is send the speakers a confirmation. It's terrible to be a speaker and not know 2 days before if the meetup is going to happen, yes or no. And it's the same for the people attending. Just tell them, hey, feel free to sign up if you cannot attend anymore this. And remember, we're going to have free pizza or great speakers, whatever is your selling point. Just those messages really tend to work, boosting up the attendance rate. Next thing to discuss is, let's say everything is fixed up and now is the day itself of the meetup. It looks very different depending on your setup, but definitely 3 things I cannot recommend enough is, 1, find a way to actively make sure that the guests feel welcome. If you go to a meetup and everybody's just like checking their phones in a corner, that doesn't create a sphere. And also remember, if your company is organizing a meetup, it is a lot easier for you, an employee, to reach out to people coming and say, hey, how are you? Have you heard about us? That's very simple compared to the other way around for people that are just there and they don't know anybody. So if you appoint, or at least create this culture of, hey, we make sure that the guests are welcome, and whenever they come, try to meet somebody new instead of like colleagues chatting with each other or checking the phone, kind of like some of the booths out there. Another step, which I think works wonders, is assigning roles. So of course, everybody understands that somebody needs to be the host, but having people appointed as you're gonna be the buddy, so like saying hi to people at the entrance and making sure that they know where to get coffee or whatever. Having tech support is vital. Thanks, buddy. Like, it pays off a lot if you say, hey, please stand behind the computer, let us know when the time is running out, everything, having a person there makes wonders. Depending on your venue, you might also need somebody to, I don't know, give the pizzas or serve the drinks or something more hospitality related. And well, when I used to organize independent meetups, that was always me. But the point is somebody needs to kind of do it a little bit. And then that leads me to probably the most important role, which is the host. Every meetup should have a host, somebody that comes on stage, welcomes everybody, tells them a little bit about the vision about the meetup. Like, we created this group based on these characteristics, and we want to build a community around this. Being a host is surprisingly rewarding and yet difficult because you want to be engaging, but you can never steal the thunder of a speaker. If anything, you're there in the stage and everything, but the idea is that you bring a lot of light to the people that you're bringing. So asking them in advance, first things first, how do I pronounce your name? Great tip. 2, what's your job? What type of things do you want me to say? How do you want me to introduce? And sometimes even telling a story about the speaker that the speaker is not aware of. Like, for example, I've done things in the past. First time I met the speaker was because I saw that they made a post on LinkedIn about this topic, and I thought it was quite interesting in stake, and I'd reach out to them. Just adding those little stories makes it a bit more alive than just saying the name and like, here it is. So there is quite a lot about being a good host. Another great tip that I love doing is asking your audience to raise hands to get to know your community a little bit. It's maybe not like the most perfect data, but it's better than not knowing, and definitely much better than another Kahoot in 2023. So asking them like, hey, can everybody raise your hands if you're familiar with DBT? And then, hey, my people. And then seeing like, that's great information for the speaker because that might help them adapt the talk to, oh, okay, nobody knows what's DBT, so let me spend some more time explaining what that is. Finally, the part that I really love the most, somebody's already laughing, is the networking side. To me, a meetup, it's kind of excuse to just get to know somebody. And I try to make it my active goal, not as an organizer really, but as somebody attending meetups and conferences like this one. I want to have at least 3 new people on my LinkedIn that I can reach out on a day because I know what's their expertise and I know how we can maybe help each other professionally. And so that's why every time I organize something, I make sure that let's call it the after party, is great. I want to build a space where people can chat, people have food, people have drinks, hopefully a place that is very close to the venue. If the venue is close to a public transportation hub, like a big station, then people stay a bit longer because, but the last train is this and that and that. So if you remove a lot of those factors for people not wanting to stay and you actually make it very cozy, a lot of value happens in that last hour of drinks. I've seen people that get job offers during that time, people that become speakers for a meetup, even consultancy gigs that happened. So if you really want to capitalize on the value of the meetup that you're building, make sure that you emphasize the drinks and the food well enough. Like, don't go cheap, give them as much as they want to drink, because that's gonna pay off exponentially. And in my case, when I used to go to meetups at Civia, my current employer, I was just a student, maybe 0 to 2 years of working experience, definitely not the person that they hired. But the coolest thing is that time has passed. I still remember those meetups, and when they reach out to me, that was the first thing that I thought, like, yeah, during the meetups, I met some really cool people there. So the proposal that I have to you is, today, I brushed, and I really did it like way too fast, over all of the things that I recommend you to do when it comes to meetups. If this is a topic that you consider interesting, maybe you have done it a lot and you want to exchange ideas, maybe you have never done it and you see some value in this, here are 2 things that you can do. The first one is you can either scan this or follow the link. It's not a Rick and roll, I promise. I built a little page documenting most of the best practices that I've learned from meetups. To be honest, most of this presentation was like a very short summary of that. So that template that I show you on how to reach out to speakers, I do have much more content like that in this little link. It's a web page. I'm not sending you anything. Just the only thing I ask you in return is, 1, build a community, really think about all of the knowledge that people inside and outside of your organization don't have the opportunity to exchange. And 2, invite me as a speaker to your meetups, or send me free t-shirts. That also works. Thank you.